You're welcome back from Investment Plus segment where, of course, as you've heard it there, you've picked tips on how to be financially smarter. Financial management is crucial, no doubt, and this is what this segment is all about. And there you have it. Of course, this now ushers us into our second and, of course, the last interview on the program. And what a way to end it with a banger, as they say. We've saved the best for the last, as I would put it, because anything that has to do with storytelling, writing, preserving history is what I'm all out for, as you know already on the show. And this is why we have with us on this segment, Engineer Ndukwe Uche. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
As you can see, he doesn't need much of introduction as an author. He's an author. Let's just say that for the sake of those who are still wondering who he is. An author. He's going to be telling us how many he has written and how many are still in those head that we are looking at. I've seen a copy already, and I want to help those watching to help me beg to have this copy because it's been a while that I held a book this well published, truly. And having just glanced through a couple of pages, I am already in love with this book. But let's start proper to welcome you on the program.
Thank you.
The topic we want to be taking a look at this morning: preserving Nigeria's history through writing.
Okay.
How important is writing as an art or for cultural preservation?
How important? Critically important. It is the only way we can permanently pass on our cultural experiences and therefore preserve those cultural realities of our lives. Culture is what makes us unique. Culture makes every people unique. The more you're able to pass on the elements of that culture to subsequent generations, the more you're able to preserve your uniqueness, your unique identity, and the more you're able to enrich the lives of those that come after us. So it is important that we not only record, but record as accurately as possible. Fidelity is extremely important in recording culture for posterity.
Fidelity is very important in recording culture for history. I mean, that's very profound and deep, because if one takes a look at, for example, the story of the Nigerian Civil War, for instance, told by different people, including those who saw it, witnessed it, and those who read about it, you tend to have some divergent views and all of that. And that's, I think, where you're talking about fidelity.
Indeed, which is why my book, OFIA Became Home, has been based on a true story that I lived through. It is an experience that I lived through. So in this slice of Nigerian history, I am talking about something I know a little bit about.
Okay.
I am trying to reflect that fidelity I was talking about. And I'm not only talking about the horrors of war in the book, I'm also talking about the cultural reality of a people whose communal spirit enabled them to weather very difficult storms during the Nigerian Civil War. So there's an element of culture in the book as well.
So this OFIA Became Home by Ndukwe Uche, a novel based on the true story of displaced Igbere people. Tell us a little bit about this Igbere people, first of all, before you talk about the book.
Okay. So Igbere is in Abia State, in what we now know as the Bende local government area of Abia State, some 37 kilometers from Umuahia, on the way to Arochukwu from Umuahia. It's a rural community of about 10,000 people, if everybody were to be there.
Okay.
And it's a community where everybody knows everyone else, virtually. And we live together, literally. What you call townhouses in Europe and elsewhere reflects the kind of settlement pattern that we have in our traditional communities, with houses contiguous and forming concentric circles in some cases. Okay. So we've always been a people that lived together, worked together, celebrated together, did everything together. The communal spirit for us is not some fancy concept. It is the reality
it is what is
of
lived.
our lives. It is the foundation of the community. So it was agrarian, still agrarian largely, but it is also modernizing fast. It is one of the most beautiful communities you can find in Igbo land today.
Okay, the Civil War changed anything about the Igbere people?
It actually brought out the best in the people, because this story is about the harrowing experience of Igbere people when the war arrived at our doorsteps 2 years into the war in 1969. Okay. At that time, there were not that many geographical entities still unoccupied by the Nigerian soldiers or Nigerian army. So we had very limited Biafran territories to run to, okay, and ended up in our bushes and forests. But it was this spirit, the communal spirit, that held us together. We didn't have to contrive anything, because we were already a people that did everything together. We held together in the bush, in the forests, for 9 months, trying to recreate the lives we knew back in our village, in the forest, in the farms, with very limited outside help. How could outside help have come in when we were talking about forests, no real roads into them? Nobody really knew where we were. And even if they knew, most of Biafra was overrun. You couldn't get to us easily, even if you wanted to. So our communal spirit came through. The best of us came through. And that's what saw us through the 9 months of having to live like scavengers and having to be creative about how we stayed alive. And even then, many died and couldn't even be accorded proper burial. So
where is OFIA? And how did OFIA become home?
Okay, so I've mentioned running into our bushes, yes, and forests. OFIA is the Igbere word for forest or bush. So the forests, our farmlands, became home for us for 9 months. 9 months from March 1969 until the end of the war on January the 15th, 1970.
You've captured that. I'm sure that must have been properly documented here. But give us a glimpse of life in OFIA for those 9 harrowing months.
Okay. So first of all, when we arrived, remember there were no houses there. There were no shelters waiting for us. The first thing we had to do was put some kind of roof over our heads in the forests, and we ended up building houses of leaves. And you can imagine how protective houses of leaves were. Of course. Yeah. Second is, we had no warning about war's arrival at our community. Just about a few hours of the booms of war, and then we were shelled out of our village. There wasn't much time to gather much, by way of food or by way of possessions. So we went in there with virtually nothing, and had to immediately start scavenging, start doing whatever it would take to stay alive. We're talking of March. The planting season hadn't even started. We're just coming out of the dry season. The period of the year we call the famine period. We call it Onwo in our dialect. Yeah. So from the very, very beginning, it was extremely difficult just to stay alive. Then we had the streams, so we fished heavily. There were some old farms We harvested whatever we could from previous years' planting. And of course, whatever we carried along, however small it was, came in handy at the beginning. But later on, we then began to do a lot of farming. Every patch of land was farmed by those who could. Remember, there were many who were already too sick before the war arrived at our doorsteps and had to be helped. Many people were carried into the forests, actually. So that we were able to farm every patch of land that was available to be farmed. We did a lot of fishing. We did a lot of hunting. We were already in the forest, we might as well.
Of course.
Yeah. And but none of that was easy. Yeah. However, holding together, we were able to survive. We even created clinics in the forest, thanks to our foremost Reverend Father in the community. He helped eventually to even pull in relief materials, we call them, from the World Council of Churches and some other entities. That helped later on in our stay in the bush. We even established a court system, believe it or not, in the bush, to try and bring some semblance of order and some semblance of justice in the new communities we were creating in the bush. So somehow we reestablished a degree of normalcy. But the most difficult thing we faced was health care, because even our native doctors couldn't cope with what they had to deal with in the bush. And modern medicine was no longer available, no longer really an option. So that was a particularly difficult aspect for us to manage, even with our strong communal spirit. Then we indulged, some of us indulged in what we were calling OFIA attack. Now, OFIA attack was crossing the front lines of the war to the other side to go and buy or barter with whatever you have for the things we needed in the bush.
Okay.
So some would cross at great risk to the Nigerian side of the war at that time to buy things like cigarettes, which soldiers would exchange some things for, and to buy salt, which was in very short supply at the time, and to buy things like that.
Okay.
Sometimes we did so by battering things like transistor radios, which people took with them into the forest as the only way of staying in touch with what was going on in the war. Some had to batter that away in order to survive. Those who were brave enough to engage in the OFIA attack would gather whatever people could offer them, loincloths, transistor radios, and so on and so forth. And they would go over to the Nigerian side, exchange those for goods, and come back if they could. Many died trying. Yeah. So things like that were what we had to do to survive.
Okay.
We domesticated a lot of wild vegetables in order to stay alive. We hunted down anything that moved in order to stay alive. Lizards were already fair game before the war. Even rats became fair game in the bush. I was myself heavily engaged in fishing for shrimps. And we would go into very thick forests that had never been explored by anybody to find them, to find the shrimps.
I could actually sit here all day listening to you, but I'm very sure I will have that opportunity off this set that is, limited by time. Okay. But let me just quickly ask, because I want to actually ask some very specific questions about writing.
Yes.
But first of all, just share with us briefly the final day that you left OFIA.
Oh, I think if you don't mind, it's best that I read.
Please.
A whole section on that.
Okay.
If we have the time. That section, you have the book, is on page 365.
Okay.
Page 365.
I'm here.
And it says back home. Okay, let's read a shorter one. The one that says leaving finally.
Okay.
361.
Okay.
361. Ndukwe's family finally left their Abambuba address on January 18, 1970, 3 days after the official end
of the war.
of the war. Their paced journey back home to the village was the polar opposite of their anxious rush out of the village 9 months earlier. And it wasn't because they had come to love their tacky shacks and their leafy neighborhoods in the bush. For one thing, there were no guns harassing them out of the bush. For another, the footpath wasn't swamped by hundreds of harried people jostling each other. They were still not entirely sure the coast was clear, but this family wasn't looking back. Their loads were lighter this time. Nothing had been acquired in the bush.
Of course.
Much had been lost, sold, or used. Much of what they created and used in their shacks, like their raffia beds, were classic alawagara. Alawagara means things you leave behind when you leave. The first half a mile of their path home ran parallel to the section of the Abamboba virgin forest that had hosted the family on day one. Not much was still virgin about the forest after 9 months of desperate pillage and systematic violations by hungry humans. As they walked with the still leafy forest to their left and rugged Hamatan dry farmland to their right, Ndukwe found himself expecting to hear the monkeys cry out their coarse goodbyes just as they cried out their coarse welcomes on their one. The monkeys, what was left of them anyway, must be happy to see the back of Igbere people. To the monkey family's chagrin, monkey meat had since proved quite healing to refugees. Ndukwe didn't hear those goodbyes. Maybe no one was home. He didn't want to think that no monkey survived on those sky-bound trees. Like the Igbere people themselves, those animals deserved to be in a position to thank God for sparing them. Ndukwe's homeward thoughts soon switched out of his pity for probably decimated monkeys and back to the reason his own family scrambled out of that virgin forest in the first place while it was still very virgin. That fear of what might be lurking inside the thick carpets of ancient leaves. Fear that later deserted them as he and his mother joined others to lift and scatter much of the centuries-old carpets in search of snails. Such thought immediately brought the choir master's new song to Ndukwe's lips. Amamihem geji kele Jehovah, amamihem geji kele onye keruwa, amamihem geji kele ọkaka na nchebe niile o chebere mo, n'ime ọfịa na nchebe niile o chebere mo, agwata mo. I don't know how to thank God for protecting me in the forest.
Okay.
Roughly translated.
Okay.
I don't know how to thank God for protecting me so that this snake didn't bite me. Everybody in their small convoy immediately picked up the song and they all walked to it all the way home.
Wow.
I hope it gives you a sense of
I could just see the images of the family with those loads on their heads, the small packs left of their belongings, and the joy in their hearts as they walk back to a place they once called home. Home of the forest. I have to say a sincere thank you for taking your time to actually read this, because it's not an easy thing to get an author to sit and do an author's reading. So you, the readers, listeners, you have every cause to say thank you to ASO TV for bringing this to your doorsteps. But of course, I said I was going to ask specific questions regarding writing.
Yes.
Now, beautifully told story, even though it's a story of pains, a story of agony, tragedy, of things that shouldn't have happened to any human being. But to be able to capture and render such a story in a documented form like this, so that generations to come will know for a fact that at some point in the history of these people, this event actually took place. As a writer, where do you write from? And I speak about the language of your mind. When you take up your pen to write, where do you write from? Do you write from your English lenses or from your local, from your own language lenses, and then you translate it into English? Because I know writers have this switch, and some find it difficult to pick where to actually write from. But
the polishing, the creative aspect. For this book, for example, the most important thing is the true story itself.
yeah,
Some of which had been in me since we experienced what happened in the book. So in terms of the content, I didn't have to think in any particular language.
Okay.
It's just what happened that I'm trying to recall and render. Of course, there are some fictional dressings around that, and there are accounts from other people in the book. So I never really, I wouldn't say I think in any particular language.
Okay.
When the inspiration comes,
you just pour it first.
I pour it down, do the download, take the time later on to craft around them, to plot, to build in whatever it would take to help the reader access the core of my message. Because in the end, for me, it is about communication. It is about making sure that the reader takes something tangible away. There are some stories you necessarily have to think of in vernacular.
Okay.
This book is infused with a lot of proverbs from my background.
Yes, you can hold your thoughts there, because I
Okay.
wanted to ask you of this.
Okay.
He who seizes and raises a child's possession beyond the child's reach will lower the possession when his hand tires.
Yes.
It's written in Igbo. I don't want to commit any. That's first written in Igbo before that translation.
Yes.
He who seizes and raises a child's possession beyond the child's reach will lower the possession when his hand tires.
Yes.
And
So
I want you to render it first in Igbo.
okay. So it's right there in the book.
Yes.
And it's actually not just in Igbo, but in my dialect.
Okay.
In the Igbere dialect.
Okay.
Yeah? And it says, Onye jọrọ ihe nwata gwoli aka elu aka nwụọ ya ọ na-egwedasị ihe nwata. If you grab a child's belonging and raise your hand beyond the reach of that child, you can choose to hold your hand up forever, which is not possible.
Of course.
Or whenever
Your hand tires.
whenever you're tired, you bring it down.
Bring it down. Probably even to the level of the owner of the possession.
So we were chased into the bush. We were denied access to our normal homes.
Yes.
But not forever. That was the moral of that. They grabbed our homesteads from us, and we ran into the forests.
Okay.
But we waited them out. And when they were tired of holding our homestead, they let go. And we came back and reclaimed them.
So the essence of asking that question is to emphasize the importance of understanding our culture, our history, particularly as writers who want to document for posterity these experiences.
Indeed.
How important is it for the writers of this generation to understand the cultural nuances, the historical experiences of their people or of the characters or the events that they want to render?
Yeah, as I said at the beginning, it's critical because we now live in a very small global village where the Igbo boy lives in New York, lives in Dubai, lives in...
He starts a family there. The family still has the identity of Igbo, but
indeed,
the cultural link.
Indeed. So the only way that kid in Iceland can show any distinction from those around him is to have something of his original background to share. Now, how can he do that if he cannot access original content like this? How can he be unique amongst his peers when necessary. It's not that it should be something he forces on himself, but whenever necessary to show that you are somewhat unique. You can only draw from your cultural roots. And if that cultural root is not accessible to you, you are in trouble.
True.
I attended a wedding of Indians in Toronto, and they first of all put on their traditional wedding before the quote-unquote white wedding. And you could see that they were back home, even though they were in Toronto.
Okay.
They were truly back home in spirit. Yeah, they were doing what they would have done in India, right there, exactly how it would be done. Now, how did they know about that if it wasn't passed on to them by other people?
So geographical location shouldn't be a limitation.
It shouldn't be
for
a limitation,
expression.
but it can be, because when you are removed from your cultural environment, you can't experience it naturally anymore. You need books, you need people to bring it to your attention in a way that is accessible to you.
This is very profound, because I see a lot of writers now who especially wants to write non-fiction, and they get caught up in that struggle between telling the true story as you have captured here and struggling to impress the reader with other literary arsenals.
Yes.
You want to use flowery words, you want to impress the reader. So which one should take precedence for someone who is documenting for the sake of history and cultural propagation? As the
we go back to that word I used in the beginning, fidelity.
Fidelity.
Yeah. You want to be true to the message you are trying to convey. Anything beyond that is actually a distraction from the core objective, if that is the core objective. You might as well go and write fiction then, and you'll be free to do what you like. Though in fiction, even in fiction, I think one should be very disciplined.
True.
Don't use more words than necessary. Don't indulge in contrived sophistication. At least that's my mantra. Yeah. So, but when it comes to sharing something as fundamental as history of a people or the culture of a people, I don't think a writer has the luxury of engaging in those peripheral, tangential exercises of embellishment, excessive embellishment. Of course, you have to bring artistic discipline and artistic elegance to bear. You owe the work that much. That is why there are some fictional characters in this book. Yeah, to bring out the artistic element, to create a little bit of tension, to allow you to keep flipping through the pages. But that should never be done at the expense of the truthfulness of the story you are trying to put across, or the originality of the cultural details you're trying to pass on.
Now, audience to literary works has been evolving over the years.
Yes.
Before now, we didn't know anything about audiobooks. Now we have them.
Yes.
A lot of people will even prefer that when they have long distance journeys.
Yeah.
That's when they I don't know whether to call it read or listen to to books. Now, but because this book should definitely reach a global audience.
Yes.
Is there an audio copy to this, or there are other digitally enabled copies that are already existent, or plans are underway to have them in those formats?
The e-book version is available on all e-book formats and e-book retail outlets. The audio book format has not been developed.
I would really love to listen to you tell the story in audio format.
Okay.
Yes, I would really look forward to that.
I'm motivated now.
True, please, I would definitely look forward to that. You know, when you listen to an author, the confidence with which they talk about their work, it's really something that only those in that space appreciate, and I sincerely do appreciate when you are reading that last chapter.
Yeah.
And definitely it is something that you should consider, the audio book, because these days, of course, we tell ourselves that we don't have time.
Yeah.
So while we're doing other things, we also want to enjoy the beauty that is in literature. So I think that should be something that should be good. But before we let you go, because our time is fast spent already, I would want to ask, where can people have access to this very important book?
At the moment, it's available online on Amazon.
Okay.
It's also available outside Nigeria on virtually every major book retailers' shelves. Okay. Its availability in Nigeria currently is limited because it was published outside Nigeria. We're in the process of exploring a Nigerian edition because of the cost. The cost of producing it outside is very high.
Like I said from the beginning, I haven't held a book so superbly published like this in a very, very long while, honestly.
Yeah. I don't know how much of your time I can take. It would have been good to
have just 1 minute
to touch on this a little bit.
1 minute.
This is the collection
that can
of
be
poems.
done in 60 seconds.
Okay, probably not. That it's. I wanted to read for you.
120 seconds.
I'm sorry.
120 seconds.
120 seconds.
2 minutes.
Oh dear.
Yes.
I just closed it.
We're pressed by time. That's it. That's
okay.
Fine.
Instead of rushing it, we will skip it. Yeah.
But I will. If you would still be available, I wouldn't mind having you another time.
So in 15 seconds, the Exodus summarizes the moment we left our village, and it goes a little bit like this: Kwapo onodum, a dawn warning, deafening, dampening, damning, deadly. Dawn's simple sounds think, hearts pulsing rates soar. Doom looms and booms with gloom. Kwapo, kwapo, unodum. Pack out, all of you. We wake and jump to face foul fate this murky morning of this sunless Sunday, March 30, 1969. We wake to heed the wrathful hints of kwapo rifles and unodum shells. We wake to run in sleeping clothes with little hopes for future sleep. We wake to run on empty tanks with fear to fuel our loyal limbs. We wake to mother's martial orders, readying her flock for a rueful flight. For the sake of your time, I'll stop there. There's a bit more of it. That actually introduces the book itself. That is one of the poems in this collection.
It does, perfectly so. Exodus. I think we definitely have another time to have a conversation around that particular one ahead, right?
Indeed. And other poems.
And other poems.
Yeah.
Definitely we will have another time to talk about this, and I can't thank you enough. He is an engineer, by the way. I wonder how engineers and doctors come into our field and they dominate. But of course, they do this to the glory and beauty of literature and literary appreciation. For those who have enjoyed this as much as I did, we want to gather together and say thank you very much, Engineer Ndukwe Uche. Of course, he is the author of OFIA Became Home. From my own point of view, this should be a best-selling book anywhere, anytime, particularly those who are interested in knowing about some of the other aspects of Nigerian civil war that are not much talked about. Because it's the civil war itself, or every other event in life, it's the experience of the people that matters. And it's efforts like this that bring some of these things to limelight. Of course, any other major book outlet out there online, he said you can find it. OFIA Became Home. And I've learned that OFIA, it means forest.
Correct.
Thank you very much. And on this note, we'll have to draw the curtains on today's edition of ASU Morning on ASU Television. My name is Usman Katun Umar, and all I can ask you to do is to be safe out there and enjoy the rest of your day. We'll be back here tomorrow again for another edition of ASU Morning. Bye for now.